Hey guys, Noel here, and before I go out about my business for the afternoon, I thought I would do a weblog video based on one of my favorite topics, and that is religion and philosophy. And I guess the person that I want to basically address his comments is Sam Harris, and by extension, a lot of the new atheists. I mean, these people have basically fallen into kind of logical, academic, and social repute just because they're very one-dimensional in their critique of religion. They're very blunt. They use broad brushstrokes. They're polemical. And it just doesn't really lend itself to kind of nuanced, empathetic logic that people in the humanities should pride themselves on having and as analytical tools when studying whatever they're discussing. So anyway, I was on YouTube. I stumbled across this Sam Harris video where he's being interviewed by it was a web news show called The Young Turks. So you can Google that and see what you think of this. Here's just kind of my impression of at least what I saw of the video, and that's basically that Sam Harris and people like him basically just dismiss religion because they just don't see a use for it. So, I mean, the analogy that I'll use is I study history. I'm not that great at math. I don't understand math that well. Therefore, because it's hard for me to understand math, and let's even say that math has been used to do a lot of terrible things, like invent the atomic bomb, I'm just going to blanketly dismiss mathematics as something that I think is crude, boring, and violent. And that's essentially what people like the new atheists do. I mean, no matter what your views on religion are, I mean, religion is, I think, a pillar of human knowledge, the desire to understand where everything around you comes from, right? Let's use a biological example, okay? A cell is like a mini planet, all right? If you open a biology textbook, you'll see that a cell has like a nucleus, which would kind of be like the core of the Earth. There's little parts of the cell that work. And, you could kind of say that those are like analogous to what we are, like human beings and plants and things like that. In the same way that the cell kind of swims through the bloodstream, the Earth kind of swims through outer space, right? And the same way that the cells, one of many cells, and the Earth, one of many planets, has an origin, because I have an origin, it's my father, it's logical to think that that the kind of solar body has a father, right? And that could be God, right? So, there's really, I think, deep, interesting kind of theological concepts that get ignored by people in the new atheist school who basically just want to dismiss religion as just a tool of violence and superstition. Here's another example. Sam Harris likes to historicize, rightly so. I mean, that's what you need to do in order to try to find contradictions in religious faiths. So, for example, he'll look at Mormonism and say that, Joseph Smith was a con man, and therefore, Mormonism is wrong. Well, I don't necessarily disagree with him in that value judgment, but in order to basically dismiss all religion kind of based on the idea that people use their position of power and the kind of human impulse to want to know God and manipulate that does not mean that that's all that religion is. I mean, Karl Marx, who's one of my favorite philosophers, has this extremely famous quote that people don't usually pay attention to the second half of. First he says, religion is the opium of the masses. Then he goes on to say it's the sigh of the oppressed and things like that. But religion is an opiate in many ways, but that's not all that it is. Within religion, there's a desire for human beings to want to understand God, and they create kind of, over time, religion is not just something that someone says, okay, this is what it's going to be, and then everyone just basically does that. When Jehovah's Witnesses would come to my door and try to convert me from being Catholic, they'd say, do you know that the word Trinity isn't in the Bible? And I would tell them, do you know that the word Bible isn't in the Bible? Because the Bible is not just something that came down out of the sky and thunk, there it was, and now we all have to do every word that it says. No. What the Bible is a it's basically a historical collection of, theological meditation, kind of political, metaphorical political history that's based in kind of certain kind of ethno kind of centric kind of terms if you're looking at, like the Jews, and then that kind of goes into the New Testament where Jesus basically kind of revolutionizes the way that Judaism was taught, at least in his, kind of circle. So, the Bible is, and I think religion in general is a language and a kind of a structure that's used to basically protect and define this human desire to want to understand and reconcile yourself to your kind of ultimate father, right? I, don't know my biological father, and, at times, and I'm sure other people who are in my similar situation, you may kind of wonder, like, well, why do I look this way? Because mostly because my father looks this way. Why do I have this kind of way of thinking about things? And you kind of want to speculate and learn. And what the Bible tells you is that in Romans 1:20 is that you can understand God by understanding his creation. And so that really is kind of a really interesting kind of chicken and egg metaphor that basically tells you it doesn't really matter what came first, the chicken or the egg, because ultimately God comes first, so I guess it's the chicken, but the egg can understand the chicken just from being inside the egg, right? So, I think these things are extremely interesting, but all of these things that are part of religion, or at least my Christian religion, or at least my understanding of my Christian religion, get completely swept under the rug in this kind of blunt, vitriolic criticism of the new atheists. I'm the first one who, is critical of the institution of the Catholic Church. I'm a practicing Catholic. Monarchical violence, pedophilia, all these other things. And I'm the first one to tell you that, I don't know. I can't tell you what parts of the Bible are totally metaphor or totally historical, and I don't think anyone can. But you have to just kind of take those things into consideration as you follow the ultimate kind of ethical code, because religion, since it comes from human beings' desire to know God, and God was reflected in human beings, and vice versa, because we use our kind of internal faculties and the external surroundings that God gives us to try to understand God. It's complex, right? And different times, and different tools get used to articulate human spirituality. Sometimes you're in a violent atmosphere, sometimes you're not, and those kinds of things come out in different ways in religious texts. That does not mean that I think that all religious texts are relative. On the contrary, I think mine is better, but that doesn't mean that I think that there's things in other religious texts that aren't valuable, that I may be missing with my way of looking at things. So maybe I should look at their way of looking at things to make my way of looking at things more well-rounded. So let me just say this. One thing that the new atheists like to do is say that, well, if you take religion to its logical conclusion, first of all, I don't know what religion that they're talking about, but apparently it's all pretty much bad, equally, or, bad in varying degrees. It's always going to be violent and bad and stupid, or that's often going to be the case. Well, let's take a look at the 20th century, the century that was governed by the ideas of secular humanism, and in some cases militant atheism, and you'll find that the 20th century was the most miserable, violent, and fanatical century in human history. At least that's been recorded, and at least that's my opinion as a historian. It's kicked off with the Titanic. the ship unsinkable by God or man, which invariably runs into one of God's natural, creations. They grew from the planet Earth, the iceberg, right? And because human hubris, and you can find this in the book of Genesis, right? The thing that's supposed to be so irrelevant and superstitious. What is the lesson of the creation story in the book of Genesis? That without the proper humility, human beings will screw themselves because they can't totally understand knowledge without understanding reverence for God, right? What is Jesus? So you don't pack enough lifeboats on the Titanic because you think you figured it all out. Well, you haven't figured anything out, right? You figured out a small piece of a big puzzle. And I can go on and talk about, the Cultural Revolution and atheist China and all these other, and Stalinist Russia and all these other, and war communism and in the Russian Civil War. And this isn't just a beat up on communism. I mean, it's any belief system, fascism, or capitalism, or any belief system that lacks what Jesus said are the two greatest commandments: to love God with all your heart and to treat others the way that you'd want to be treated. And even if you're an atheist, you can still apply those rules to yourself by having an idea that you need to have the proper humility for higher truth with a capital T, like the law of gravity. Like, there is kind of an elementary morality that is just kind of inside of you that you should be able to understand and apply and extrapolate, right? I mean, I think that comes from God, because God made the material that grew into what my body ultimately is, right? But even if you don't believe in God and you just believe in material, like material is God, right? It just always existed, then you should still have an ethical humility, right? But the problem is that the logical conclusion of atheism as taught to us by the 20th century is a lack of perspective and vitriolic hubris within a kind of this humanistic impulse that just totally led to massive death and destruction. And if I just reduced atheism to that, atheists would rightly be angry. But that's exactly what people like Sam Harris do when they basically try to equate Christianity or Islam or something like that with its most stupid or unthinking practitioners, So let me just end with this. On this Young Turks program I was watching Sam Harris on, he basically is complaining that my critics are reducing my views and distorting my views and not representing the complexity of my views. And you know what I say to him? I say, read the passage in the gospel where St. Peter pulls out a sword and hacks off a Roman soldier's ear, and Jesus tells him, put your sword away, because if you live by the sword, you die by the sword. And this stupid book, the Bible, according to Sam Harris, it's basically got the reason why Sam Harris is so pissed off, because he presented these kinds of crude, vitriolic, one-dimensional caricatures of religion, which is a very deep theological impulse within human beings' desire for greater knowledge, and basically just said it's stupid and crude. So you know what? People are calling you stupid and crude because, sadly, your critique of religion, your atheism, is about at least it seems to me, pretty much as nuanced as the kind of a prejudiced evangelical Christian's criticism of something else. I mean, it might be well-intentioned, but it's probably, doesn't have as many dimensions to it as it should. And the same thing goes with your critique of the new atheist critique of religion. So until next time, guys, my name's Noel. I'm going to go enjoy some of this sunny weather, and I'll see you all later. Bye-bye.